So we are going to start our April Lunch and Learn, and we have the fabulous Charlotte Temple is going to be conducting today's topic on SSI and employment. So Charlotte, if those of you that don't know her, has over 30 years experience in the disability field and was the vice president of the ARC of Jacksonville for the last 22 years. So she is very knowledgeable. I am going to share my screen and let Charlotte, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. I am going to, how do I do this? Make you the host to share my screen. There you go.
Okay, let's see if I can do this now. Could be. Did that show up?
Yes, it did.
Okay, we're on, let me see. We're not on the first slide though. Let me see if I can back it up. Okay, here it is, SSI and work. And today the topic is specifically supplemental security income and work. If you're interested in supplemental, Social Security disability insurance payments or SSDI, we're going to cover that next month. But because this is a kind of an in-depth topic on its own, I don't want to confuse it with the two of them. Okay, if that's all right with everyone. If not, put it in the chat and we'll see what we can do to make it better. But I just don't want to be confusing. So if what you're working with is supplemental security income and you're curious about it and its effect on work, this is the session. The first part of that is supplemental security income, or SSI, is money that is paid or funds that come from the general treasury. They're not part of the Social Security trust funds, and they're not based on a person's earnings or paying into the system. It is totally a needs-based public assistance program that does not require a person to have any work history or have enough work history to qualify for Social Security disability insurance payments or retirement income. You don't have to be in one of those categories because you've earned enough quarters to get there. So it's totally a needs-based program, doesn't require anyone to have a significant or hardly any work history. It pays disabled individuals who are unable to work and have limited income and resources, because that's another caveat of it, is there are some resource and limited income requirements. It is a benefit for children and adults in financial need, mostly seniors and those disabled, but there must be limited income and resources. For children under age 18, keep in mind that the income of the parents is deemed on the children, and so sometimes a child will not be eligible for supplemental security income payments, not based on their disability, but based on the fact that their parents' income and assets are too high. And that's usually a very confusing thing with a lot of people I talk to, is why isn't my child eligible? Well, your child isn't eligible most of the time based on parents' income and assets. But at the age of 18, at 12:01 a.m. on the individual's birthday, they become an adult, a household of one. Doesn't matter where they live, they now look at the individual themselves for their income and assets, and can be eligible for SSI. So for people who apply for SSI for a child and they know they're disabled enough to meet the listings and could get a medical determination but don't receive an SSI payment, the reason 90% of the time is parents' income and assets until they turn 18. 18, apply again, and that same individual, if they don't have assets of their own or significant income of their own would also now be eligible. Just a little kind of let you know where we're at. SSI looks at your resources. Things that are included are bank accounts, IRAs, CDs, stocks, bonds, a second car. You can own one car, some life insurance policies and burial policies, and a property other than that you own other than where you live. Excluded is the home you live in, your first car, some burial plots for self and family, and some resources set aside for burial. Also excluded resources are ABLE accounts. A lot of you may have ABLE accounts, and so that's an excluded resource. Or if you have supplemental special needs trust, pool trust, those are also excluded resources. So there's some other things, but we won't get into all of that today because we're specifically looking at how does it impact you when you go to work.
Hey, Charlotte, we do have a question in the chat that pertains probably to the slide before. We have someone that has a son with Down syndrome, so she is wondering if that would be the other meeting you spoke of.
No. Down syndrome would be more than likely eligible, especially if you have your karyotype. If you have your karyotype, you don't have to jump through extra hoops with Social Security. But if you don't have your karyotype, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, if you have a child with Down syndrome, look it up and go get it if you don't have it, because you'll need that for eligibility for many things. But Down syndrome alone is not what you're looking at. For under 18, you're looking at family income and assets. That's what you're looking at. After 18, the individual with Down syndrome would more than likely be eligible on their own. But then if that individual with Down syndrome earns some included or has some included resources, it could be treasury bonds or other things that people have put in their name, then that might exclude them from SSI eligibility. But as long as they don't have resources, I think maybe it's in the next slide or it's around somewhere above $2,000, then they should be eligible after they reach 18.
Okay, while we're still here, we have another one.
Okay.
How do you determine what the individual is receiving? Because the deposit in the bank is labeled SSA. I guess, is that, and do you want to be a little more specific with that?
Well, I will tell you, if you don't know the benefit your son or daughter is receiving, or the individual you're working with is receiving, then check with Social Security Administration, because that's the easiest way to find out what they're receiving. Or look at your letters you got from them. When the person was made eligible, they say you're eligible for this benefit. Their statement that they could receive every year on money paid to them should say what the benefit is. I will tell you that 60% of the people or more that I speak with do not know the benefit they're on. The federal benefit rate for SSI is $943 this year, but we'll go into other circumstances why it may be less than that in another slide. So I don't know if that answered your question. Probably it does not, because unless I see your benefit letter, I don't know what you have. Is there another one or?
Oh, not right now, no.
Okay, but it's very important that you know what benefit the person is on. And if you don't, contact Social Security Administration and find out what that is. If they have an online Social Security account, or if you're a representative payee, you can open an online Social Security account for them, and you can find that information. It'll be in their account with Social Security. Living arrangements are a factor that can determine how much a person with supplemental security income can get. Benefits may vary on where you live, in someone else's household, in an institution, in a group care home, or a board and care facility, a group care or board or care facility, because not to not to confuse that with an agency for persons with disabilities group home. They're talking about a different situation there. And we'll talk about how it impacts it as we go on. SSI looks at income two ways. You either earn the income, it's usually from work. They count gross wages, any net earnings from self-employment, or payment for services in a sheltered workshop. If even there are some still there that have sub-minimum wage, or even if you're on the minimum wage or above, any income that you receive that you've earned, you've worked for and received, they're going to count. Earned income is if you get an additional Social Security Administration benefit, veterans benefit, unemployment benefits, any interest you receive on your bank accounts, any pension somebody may have, or cash somebody gives you from family or friends. That's all considered unearned income, and Social Security will count that when they're looking at your Social Security income, supplemental security income check. You're responsible for reporting under supplemental security income. If you're a representative payee, Social Security says these are your responsibilities. If you're an individual yourself with a disability, then this is your responsibility. You must report changes in your status, who you live with, whether you're married or single. All of these things can affect your benefit amount. If you work, you have to report your earnings, and it's suggested that you report those by the third day of the month following your earnings. You can report it a little bit later, but that may impact how quickly Social Security is going to adjust your SSI payment. And that's something that needs to be done, but no later, they say, than 10 days after the end of the month in which your wages occurred, or if you've had any change in your work or any change that may affect your SSI payment as soon as possible. You can report your wages at a toll-free automated wage reporting telephone system. There's actually a mobile wage reporting application. You can mail them in, or you can submit them through your Social Security, my Social Security account, that online account that I was talking about. If you mail them, the delay in your check change is going to be later, and that's going to be a little difficult sometimes to keep up with, and we'll talk about that. Other things that you should report under SSI, here's a nice little list of those things. And for all of you that are on this call or a Zoom meeting, Dina is going to send you out these slides afterwards. So don't worry about writing it all down, and I'm not going to read them all to you, but after the session, if this is something that you're interested in, you'll have this whole list for you, okay? And we'll move on. Let's talk about briefly some work incentives, and then we'll talk maybe a little bit more in depth with those as we go forward. Is you get a $65 income exclusion every month. And then your check is reduced. Well, you also get a $20 income exclusion every month of any other kind of income or including work. So it amounts to an $85 exclusion every month of that combination. Then there's other work incentives, impairment-related work expenses, blind work expenses, 1619B, which we'll talk about again in depth later, a continuation of Medicaid eligibility, and recovery during vocational rehabilitation, plan for achieving self-support, and expedited reinstatements. So let's talk about SSI income exclusions. The first income exclusion is for $65 of earned income and any other type of income you may receive of $20 a month. And then half of the remaining work income is excluded. So if we looked at it like this, if your gross wages in a month was $896, you would subtract $20 of general income exclusion, $65 of any earned income exclusion. And so on wages of $896 a month, or in 1 month, you would have $811 that they're looking at as your gross wages. And gross wages is not what you receive in your bank account. You got to look at your pay stub and see what your wages would be before any deductions are taken, because they're looking at gross wages, not net wages, okay? But of that 811 of what they're going to count as your wages that they're going to count, you divide that by 2. So now your countable income with supplemental security income is $405.50. So you subtract that from the federal benefit rate this year, which is $943 if you're entitled to the entire check. If you subtracted that $405.50, your SSI payment would be $537.50 for that month. Now let's talk about how you report your wages and how this is impacted.
Charlotte,
Okay.
if I may interrupt, I think we've got some people in the waiting room.
Okay.
Since you're the host, if you could let them in, that would be great.
Oh, okay. Let me find waiting room here. Give me a moment. Oh,
Under participants.
47 people. Okay.
Just admit all.
And then admit all. Okay. I'm so sorry.
No,
Thank you for
okay.
keeping up with that with me. For me. Okay. I think they're all coming in. We'll hold up if everybody's okay with that. I hate to go over too much though, because it is, we're not doing too bad. We're just 15 minutes in. Any other questions anyone on the currently in has before we pick back up?
There's nothing in the chat. I don't know if people want to unmute and ask directly. I'm sure that is fine too.
Yeah, and I can unmute all for a moment here. I see where I can do those things. Okay, if you want to unmute yourself, then and ask a question, you're welcome to do so. If not, I believe everybody is currently in, and we'll kind of pick up. Should we do just a slight review or pick up?
No, pick up.
Oh, wait, we have 3 more in the waiting room.
Right, we are going to send this out to everyone, so.
Okay, admit all. Okay. So those that are joining us late, or I didn't realize that I had the ability to put people in, and Dina no longer had that. Dina will tell me if anybody else comes. As we go forward, everyone will receive a copy of the presentation today. So everything that we've talked about before will be on the slides. And what we're talking about right now is how your income impacts your SSI check. And so we're down to the first half of the slide, where if your gross wages was $896 and you had $20 general income exclusion, a $65 earned income exclusion, your countable, I'm sorry, I've got somebody else to admit right here. Your countable income would now be $811 that supplemental security income is going to going to count. And that would be divided by 2, which would leave you with 405 countable income. Then your SSI check, if you've got the whole 943 of the federal benefit rate of 2024, you would minus the $405.50 of countable income, your SSI payment would be $537.50. Now let's go back to reporting your wages. If you earn that $896 gross income in January of this year, And in February, before the 10th of the month, but I'm going to say before the 3rd of the month, you reported those wages. It takes them a period of time to work that through their system and understand that your wages was $896 for January. So your SSI payment is only going to be $537.50. But in February, what you're going to get, if you were entitled to, if you just started work, for instance, and you were entitled to $943 in your SSI check, what are you going to get? You're going to get $943. In March, you're going to get $943 because your January wages is probably not going to impact your check until April. And so that $405 that they were supposed to, that they would have reduced your January payment by had they known your wages were going to be that amount, is going to be owed back to Social Security. Now, your wages generally are not going to change that much every month. If you're paid hourly, then your hours may go up and fluctuate a little bit each month, but not to that extreme. But each month, there's going to be a 2 to 3 month lag in the reduction of your check for the months prior to that. So you're always going to be, unless you do these calculations and keep up with what your check should have been versus what it is, you will wonder why I'm always in a payback situation or they owe me money. And so reporting everything as timely as possible limits that to only a couple of months. If you don't, and they have to catch up for more months, it's going to be more than that. But here's the other part of it. If you earned $896 in a month, you still get that $537.50 in your supplemental security income check. So the total income for that month is actually $1,433.50. Oh my goodness. What would I rather have to live on? $1,433.50 or $943? I got news for you. I'd rather have the $1,433.50 to spend. And so being scared to work while on SSI, as long as you understand how it works, is just not a good place to be. Because let's go to the next slide. I believe it's on the next slide, if I can get there.
We do have one question
Okay.
regarding student earned income exclusion.
I did not include that, but what I have sent out or will send out is a link to the Red Book, ssa.gov, and or you can do just a search for the Red Book. And in the Red Book, it's going to tell you exactly all how the student income exclusion works. And I believe it's close to $7,000 a year now that's a student income exclusion that they don't count at all. So until you reach age 21 or through age 21, that is just a fantastic work incentive. And in the Red Book, if you'll download that, and you can get it in Spanish if anybody speaks Spanish, then you can see any other work incentives we might not talk about here today, but we'll talk about a good many of them here today. Just try to keep mindful of how much time we all have. And so we're doing pretty good here. But let's see if I can get to the next slide. I'm not sure if I got something that's keeping me from doing that. I was going to next slides pretty good for a while, and now I'm not moving. Oops. Maybe we are talking about impairment-related work expenses. I'm sorry, I don't have the whole list of what I've got here, but I've got some other slides I'm sure are in here we'll go about. If you have any impairment-related work expenses, then the cost of these items and services, if they're paid for by the beneficiary and are needed to engage in work, then those impairment-related work expenses can reduce your gross income. The items are services correlate with the SSA established medical basis of disability, or the items and services correlate with any medically established impairment being treated by a physician or healthcare provider. And of course, there's a lot more on the ssa.gov website and in the Red Book that will talk about what all made some of those countable expenses be. But you want to make sure that you've ran those by whoever you're working with the Social Security Administration, and that they are approving those impairment-rated work expenses. I mean, related expenses. And then SSI has additional blind work expenses. They're only for SSI, and they exclude wages that a beneficiary who's visually impaired uses to meet expenses needed to work and reduces countable income. So again, I'm going to refer you back to that Red Book and look at those blind work expenses because that will give you a lot of additional information. But let's talk about what happens if your SSI check goes to zero here. If you earned, and no other things are existing here, if you earned gross wages of $1,971, you subtracted that $20 general income exclusion, you took out the $65 earned income exclusion, that gets you to $1,886. Divide that by 2 of 943 countable income. You subtract 943 countable income from 943 SSI payment, if that's where you're starting from. And guess what? Now you can earn $1,971 in a month when your check will zero out. Again, what would I rather have? $1,971 a month or 943? I can tell you, I would rather have 1,971,000. Let's see, I've got other people to admit here. Give me just a moment. I think, okay. Now, for most, let's see, I think I've got to get away from that to come back to here. Whoops. But here's the next thing. If you're not getting $943 a month in your federal benefit rate that you're entitled to, now this is with no work income, no other income that they may count, because we talked about other income sources that they may count, but you're living at home with your family and you are not paying for any of your expenses to live there. You're over 18, you're not paying your family rent, you're not buying your own food, then they will look at the cost of living for you in that home. They have a whole formula where they can add up all the living expenses in that home, the cost of the home, you know, and some stuff they add to that, and then they divide it by the number of people living there. And if you can't afford to live there on your $943 a month, they're going to reduce your benefit, not by what they possibly could, but they're going to only reduce it by 300% of the federal benefit rate. So if Social Security is charging the individual with income in kind maintenance and support, that's what it's called, in-kind maintenance and support, then they will reduce your federal benefit of $943 to 300% of the federal benefit rate. And in 2024, that amount would be $628.67 would be your maximum SSI check that you could receive before wages or any other income is included. And I have a link here. If Dina emails you the presentation, that link is live, and you can go on that link and actually see how they calculate those things and what the current benefit rate is for, again, 2024. But you can also look in subsequent years, and then that would be what that amount would be. Any questions?
Yes, so we have two questions. One is from the slide previous, and the example you gave with the SSI at 0, do you risk losing Medicaid?
We're going to go into that.
Okay, and then the other question, is there a situation where an entire check would be kept for repayment for an extended number of months?
Could be, yes. And that depends on what you negotiate with the Social Security Administration to do. You can request, depending on the circumstances, you can request that payback that is needed for almost any reason. I mean, because everybody doesn't get into a payback situation because of earnings necessarily. They can be because they were over resources or lots of other different circumstances. We're not necessarily talking about that today. We're talking about income and work, but you can negotiate with them of how much they would take out of a check each month due to hardship of meeting your living expenses and buying your food. Or sometimes if, there's just no way to ever kind of repay it, they're going to be looking at, is there any way that they could forgive it because of your individual circumstances? But if it's due to work, the best thing with work is you keep up with your monthly income and know what your check should have been for that month, because the difference you're going to be owing back to them. If your check goes down and the subsequent check is less based on prior work months, then they will owe you back for the month for the amount it should have been. If you look at it, it all evens out over the course of the year, but it is that month to month, I'm overpayment, I'm underpayment, I'm overpayment, I'm underpayment, I'm overpayment, but it shouldn't last more than 2 to 3 months because you should be turning in your wages on a timely manner. But I know people that get caught in this, and they get caught very significantly in it. And then there's a lot of people that, due to COVID, and there's a lot of discussion on the federal level about what they're going to be doing with SSI overpayments and things during that period of time. And when people had challenges getting to the internet or other means of reporting their wages and things. So keep abreast of that. But if you only had the in-kind maintenance and support reduced eligibility for your federal benefit rate of the $628.67, and your gross wages was $1,343.34, and you took out your $20 of any income exclusion and your $65 of your earned income exclusion, which got you down to $1,257.34 divided by 2. The reason it's divided by 2 is supplemental security income reduces your check for $1 for every $2 earned. So you keep $1 of it, you give them $1 of it. So then your countable income would be $628.67. $628.67 is your payment minus $628.67 equals a 0 SSI payment. Again, would I rather earn $1,342.34 in a month? Or would I rather have that $628 and 67 cents to live on. To me, it's a no-brainer, go to work. But now I'm going to even hopefully give you some security in knowing that this is not going to hurt your Medicaid. The work incentive that's probably most important in the Red Book for most of the people that I work with is 1619B. If you're still disabled and meet all other eligibility rules, no more than $2,000 in resources, you don't own 2 cars, you can own a home. I mean, all of those other things, all of those other eligibility rules, you're still disabled and you need Medicaid in order to work. Oh my goodness, if you were sick, would you need Medicaid? Yes. Doesn't mean that you have to have ongoing Medicaid expenses. If your gross income is insufficient to replace Medicaid and to replace your supplemental security income and any publicly funded attendant care, you are eligible for 1619B and continued Medicaid until you reach the Florida Medicaid threshold. I'm only going to talk about Florida here today. You can go on the SSA website and you can look up continued Medicaid under 1619B, and you can get to every state's Medicaid threshold. But Florida's this year is $36,734 for an annual income that it amounts to $3,061.16 of monthly income in 2024. So if you're earning over that, you can also qualify for an individualized threshold for Medicaid eligibility. And that comes back to, can you afford to do that under your to provide your Medicaid and all of your Medicaid supports and services that you would need in order to be healthy and be able to work without having the Medicaid eligibility. And Medicaid can have an individualized threshold for you that can carry your income far above that $36,734, as long as you meet that criteria to have an individualized threshold established.
Okay, we do have a question regarding ticket to work. Is that something you're going to cover? You want me to get into the question?
Well, ticket to work under SSI, not SSDI, but under SSI, just says if you lose your cash payment, you get your cash payment back very quickly. If you're on a ticket to work and you somehow lost your supplemental security income eligibility, not for resources, but for work, then you could get it back in the subsequent month, which is like an expedited reinstatement and all that other stuff. But a lot of the ticket to work is looking at your SSDI payment, which we're not talking about this week. We're going to talk about it next month, the Social Security Disability Insurance, because with Social Security Disability Insurance payments, you either get all your check or you get nothing. And your eligibilities are just a little bit different. But under SSI, you generally continue SSI eligibility as long as you meet these criteria. As soon as you lose that and you lose your work, you lose your income, you go back to SSI and you can say, you know, I'm still disabled, and you can get in much quicker as long as you have that ticket to work in place. And it does give you extensions on your SSI determination of disability, which occurs every 3 to 7 years, depending on what cycle you're on. It extends that for as long as your ticket to work is active. They may not go back into medical reviews for eligibility for SSI. But it's much simpler under SSI, so I don't usually cover it too much in depth. So what we're saying with whether you're on the whatever check you're on, you know, whether you're on that 300% federal benefit rate or whether you're on the 943 current federal benefit rate for 2024, you basically are going to maintain your eligibility for supplemental security income as long as you still need Medicaid, and as long as you can meet that individualized threshold or your income does not exceed $3,061 per month if you don't meet that individualized threshold with Medicaid, because until your income reaches that, your SSI is not in danger. I mean, your Medicaid is not in danger. And then your you can go up with an individualized threshold above that. And through all of this, you will have an underlying SSI eligibility until at some point, if you cannot longer be eligible for Medicaid under these circumstances of 1619B, then you may lose your SSI benefit. The main reasons, though, that people lose their SSI benefit is usually because they go over resources of $2,000 in every account or any accounts that they have, and they're over that resource limit on the last day of the month, or certainly that amount is in your bank accounts or all resources on the first day of the month. It happens when Representative Hayes commingle their son or daughter's check as an adult with their accounts, because whatever's in that account is deemed eligible or is deemed part of the resources for the individual with a disability and on SSI payment. So part of the maintaining your eligibility for SSI through working or non-working is making sure that you're staying in touch with and know about all the eligibility requirements for supplemental security income. Any questions with that?
No more in the chat right now.
Okay. Or I can release the mics in just a minute, because I want to go over one other thing, and I don't want to not cover this because this is very important. Well, here's the work incentives, but I guess I can't see all of my slide here, but while on SSI and working, you can keep your Medicaid and Medicaid waiver even when you no longer receive a cash payment under SSI with the 1619B work incentive. That's really the most important thing. But additional information for anyone who's on a home and community-based services waiver. These are people that are under that long-term managed care waiver that you get into through the Department of Children and Families, through the Department of Elder Affairs, or through those that are on a home and community-based services waiver through the Agency for Persons with Disabilities, which is the iBudget or the CDC Plus. When you're on one of those home and community-based services Medicaid waivers, the 2024 gross income and other income, it's all income sources, limits for waiver eligibility is $2,829 a month. This is below that 3,000 and some odd Medicaid threshold for SSI continued eligibility under 1619B. But now we're talking about the Department of Children and Families. We're not talking about Social Security anymore. We're talking about the Department of Children and Families that determines your eligibility for Medicaid and your home and community-based services waivers. You can still continue to earn above that amount, the $2,829. But in order to do that, you must have an income disregard. And the only way to disregard that income is to open a qualified income trust. Here in Florida, sometimes they're called a Miller Trust or some pooled supplemental special needs trust, which are like a first party trust. The person's own income goes into it or money, can serve as a qualified income trust. But if you get close to having income, I would say once your income reaches $2,800 a month, you need to, or you foresee it's going to go above that month, you need to go open one of these trusts and communicate that with the Department of Children and Families. You can get that under either through your account with them. You can get the information on how to do that, who you have to report that to the Department of Children and Families, because they will have to know that you have put any income over that threshold in a qualified income trust in the month it was received. It cannot go over that month. They're very strict with the rules. 10 cents over it, I say a penny over it, is going to cause you problems. So if anybody foresees their income to be going over that amount, which is quite separate from SSI eligibility, this is home and community-based Medicaid waiver services, then you want to go ahead and open up or consider opening up one of those qualified income trusts, a pooled trust or a Miller trust, and can contact me or Department of Children and Families to know how to do that. And there is a book that is put out by the Department of Children and Families. It's about 20-something pages long. It's called SSI Related Disability Programs, or SSI Related Medicaid Programs, I believe it is. And in that, you can read the information about a qualified income trust. You can also search it under the Agency for Healthcare Administration, which is ACA, Agency for Healthcare Administration, Florida, which oversees all Medicaid in the state of Florida. And I believe that they have some sheets that talk about the qualified income trust.
What about an Able United account? Is that?
That is not an income disregard. That's a resource disregard. And then you have to understand the difference between income is what comes in, whether it's earned or unearned. Resources is what you have. And so income does turn into a resource, but for eligibility, they're looking at income coming in. Resources, they're looking at what's still in your accounts. And the only income disregard that I'm aware of that's allowed federally or in the state is supplemental special needs trust and qualified income trust, Miller trust, and sometimes a pooled trust. It depends on how they're worded and what the state accepts, but those are allowed. Now, the ABLE account doesn't count when I was talking about earlier about slide 1 or slide 2 as a resource. So the funds in an ABLE account does not count as a resource for SSI eligibility. Okay, if you want me to, maybe I can see where I can, or you can take it over now because we're into that question stage. I guess we didn't have quite as many questions as I expected going through it, but we can unmute your mics if you want to ask questions, or if you want to put them in the chat, then Dina will forward those to me.
So I think we've covered pretty much in the chat, or the questions you answered as we went.
Okay. It's really kind of very simple when you separate it out from the two different benefits. It gets very confusing when you're talking about one and then you jump over to SSDI and you come back over to SSI and everybody goes, oh my goodness, what applies to me? Now, what we didn't cover, can take just a minute because we have a little extra time, is Social Security for SSI does have two other very good work incentives. One is Plan for Achieving Self-Sufficiency, which is a PASS plan. It's a plan that the individual works out with Social Security, and where you can put aside money out of your SSI check or your earned income where you can save for education, for anything that you needed for work to be more self-sufficient and more independent at work or with work. Sometimes you can save up for an accessible vehicle that you need to go back and forth to work in. A lot of different things you can have, but they all have to be work related. They have to have a work goal, and that plan has to be approved by the PASS cadre. And I believe in our region, they are in Birmingham, Alabama. Don't have to travel there. You do your information online and with them. And, but PASS plans are very good. You can read more about the PASS plans on the SSA.gov, Social Security Administration.government website. And that's very good. The other one is a PES plan. If you're self-employed and you have to own equipment or you have to have things in order for you to be self-employed, then they don't count those assets as resources for you for SSI. So a PES or a PASS plan are both two good work incentives. They don't apply to everybody, but they do apply. The student earned income exclusion, which I believe is close to 7,000 this year, is good for those that are doing internships over the summer or who have part-time jobs, starting in high school and beyond, and can move forward with those work incentives, which is really great because that's a lot of income exclusion. One other caveat I will mention is that unearned income, we didn't really talk about how that's reduced after the $20 exclusion, but it's $1 per dollar reduction in your check. So unearned income does cost you more in your SSI check than earned income. But really, I'd rather have anywhere from $1,600 to $1,900 a month coming in than $943 or $687. I mean, I've just got to say that working is worth it. Go to work, have a better quality of life.
Can you go over the name of those plans again that you mentioned?
A PASS plan, and it's going to be in your red book.
Okay. PAST?
PASS, plan for, let me go to the exact wording here. Don't want to mess it up. It's a PASS plan. PASS is a plan for achieving self-sufficiency. And then the PES is for, it's for the work or the assets that you would have to be self-employed. So, but they're both in the work incentive book, in the red book. And then we'll tell you who to get in contact with. They have, that red book is phenomenal. You can go in there and read everything that's available to recipients of SSI, and it tells you who to connect with and how to connect. So it's really good on that. We could spend hours training on either one of the PES or the PASS plans or any one of these work incentives, really. But the information is there. It's available to you. The Social Security Administration has a lot of great resources. Just avail yourself of them.
Okay, so we have two questions.
Okay.
Again, so the red book is on the SSA.gov website.
And I'm sending you a link, I believe. I mean, not sending you, the link to that will be in the presentation that you will send out.
Yes.
And it's a PDF, I believe I sent you. Yes. And if you open that up, that PDF link should be live.
Okay. One question is, as far as unearned income.
Yes.
An individual's son lives in a group home and receives the full SSI check, and the mom supplements that. What does she need? I guess the question is,
Mom can buy anything she wants to buy for him.
Does it need to
pay for anything she wants to pay for him? Mom cannot add money to his account.
And she doesn't need to report what she buys?
No.
Okay. which is what I thought, because we're in that situation that our daughter is in a group home and receives, and
Right. You
Yeah.
can pay the cell phone bill, you can pay the internet bill, you can pay for a cable bill, you can carry them out to eat, you can buy and give them movie tickets. Yeah, just can't give them the money to go do it themselves. That's income coming into them, and that's not good. If they live in the home with you and you're into that in-kind maintenance and support, you might want to think about charging them rent, because preparing to move out into the real world and being responsible for their own bills, or preparing them for, oh my goodness, I have a daughter, she's 32 years old, has Down syndrome. At some point, I'm not going to be here. And so she needs to be able to learn how to budget as much as possible. So, charging them rent, you can charge them board if you want to, which includes food. But when you're talking about rent for a person living in your house, for the most part, if you have a master bedroom, they're not using that. If you have a garage or a place to park your car, they're not using that. If you have a formal house with a living room, they're not going to go, they wouldn't be caught dead there. They're going to run through the refrigerator in the kitchen and rob it, and the pantry maybe, sit at the table and eat a meal with you occasionally, and go to wherever the TV in their game room is. If that's their bedroom, so be it. But that's what you're doing, is you're only charging them rent like you would for a college student living in your home, whatever, if you took in somebody for their room and some use of common living space.
What about this? So is a lump sum payment from Social Security considered income or a resource?
It's not considered anything until, if it's a lump sum payment from Social Security, it's not considered anything until, I think it's 6 months. After that, it would be, I believe it's 6 months. It may be extended beyond that now. There was a good bit of changes through COVID, and I'm not sure where it's bounced back to. Your income tax return, if you get back money from your taxes you paid in, because that's already been considered part of your gross income, that's not considered a resource.
So
but you might want to move it to an ABLE account,
right,
just because it's safer. Or if you have a trust, a first party trust or a pooled trust, just go ahead and move it to your trust, because those are not counted. And then you don't have to worry about keeping those amounts separate, so that the Social Security Administration won't come back after it and question you.
Okay, so another question is, if someone receives a large SSI back payment, can those funds only be spent on certain items?
They have the right to spend their money on most anything they want to spend them on.
Okay.
Payment. I will tell you that for people who are on SSI, the chances of them having access to that at any time later on in their life, when they have emergency come up or other things, is very difficult ever to replace. So putting those things either in a supplemental special needs trust or an ABLE account, as much as you can put in an ABLE account, does give you money for a rainy day. Because if you, and you can spend it all, you can buy a car, you can put down a payment on a home, but how are you going to keep the maintenance up on it? Pay taxes. I mean, so you've got to consider a large, back payment from Social Security as maybe this is your savings. Maybe you can survive, and take a little bit out of it at a time, or you can go spend it and go through it. And I've seen people spend it and go through it and buy lots of really nice, great things. And then when time comes and they need money, this money is no longer there for them. But it's yours. Do what you want to with it.
Right. Another question is, if the SSI recipient has established an LLC, does any money in the business bank account get factored into SSI qualification?
That is a real complicated question. And so you'll have to look, I would look to the SSI part of the Social Security Administration talk to a supervisor and explain what you're doing and how you're doing it and what's there, because that's what's going to define all of the stuff. And I've dealt with people with LLCs before, and it's real complicated. You need to go to Social Security Administration and go to the experts, because they're the ones that's going to determine that.
Great. Well, we are at time, so
Okay.
we thank you very much for your knowledge as always. We will send out a copy of the presentation later today or tomorrow. We are going to put this on YouTube for people to reference, and we hope everyone will register and attend in May when Charlotte goes over SSDI.
Okay. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Okay.